We have our normal complement of 4 people tonight, but one of our regulars is missing. Good old Dieter is doing some personal stuff, and he won't be with us tonight. But as many times, we've got Diane Hansen here to lend her perception or perspective on flight attendant and what that means or what that adds and to all of you as fearful flyers. And Eric Larson, of course, back with me to catch me in all the lies that I might make, and mutually I'll try to catch him in it. And we've got a special guest, Don Calvert is with us tonight. And how embarrassing when you clear your throat and it sounds like you forgot the guy's name or the person's name there. So anyway, so we're glad to have you tonight. This, of course, is the place where you want to go if you are let me do sorry, I had another button to push here. Okay, so this is where you want to be when if you have a fear of flying, or if you are know somebody who's afraid to fly, or maybe you just like to talk airplanes with us and at us and all that. So we're glad nonetheless that you joined us, and hope you'll stick with us for the next 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll hopefully give you some thoughts and some insights on how to overcome this. I always like to mention the Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather Club that is available to anybody out there. It's a private Facebook group, and you can go over there and meet other people that are going through the same kinds of challenges you are in all the various stages, either just getting started in the midst of that, or are out there flying successfully. And it's a great resource, and we get a lot of positive feedback from people out there. I mentioned our special guest is Don Calvert. Don just flew last week, and he's going to share his experiences throughout the course of his experiences with fear flying. And I wanted to just mention, some of you may have seen I did a segment for Inside Edition. I can't remember. It was either in May or June, something like that. And it's one of those things that you always welcome the attention until sometimes on some of the shows when you get on right there doing it and you think, oh gosh, I'm not sure this is going to really be this kind of thing I want my name attached to. But I had a couple of fearful flyers saw it today, and they said no harm done. And they had found this young woman on YouTube, who at the prompting of her mom said, you should put this on YouTube. But her mom, I don't know, she was just really struggling. And so they found her, and we met up, and I did a little coaching, very little coaching, and then we all flew together. And so they captured it. It'll be the producer called me and told me it was going to be on today, and I did not see it. It was on channel 3 here in Phoenix at 3 o'clock or 3:30, but they'll be posting it on the web, and perhaps local channel 3 will be posting the show that they ran it on as well. So we'll put out a little blurb if and when we see that. I'll talk briefly about the monthly live coaching webinar and the membership club, and then we'll do a little talking about U.S. airports and how they were rated. This was an article that was in the what am I trying to say? The Wall Street Journal. Okay. So just a quick alert. Our next coaching session is going to be on Thursday, December 15th. That's the third Thursday of the month. And we're going to go back to Mind Chatter. I'm going to continue this, and we're going to talk more about pure techniques on things that you can do to cope with your fear of flying, particularly leading up to and while you're on during your flight. And that'll be 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you can either access that through our new membership, if you're into that, and get them free. If you're a member of the 201, the Clear for Takeoff 201 course, you can get it through that, or you can purchase individual coaching episodes. Okay. And we have, as many of you know, who have purchased something, the Fearless Flight Kit, the 201 course, Capt or Cockpit Confidential, any of this, we have an app now. There's the slide with all the varying levels of membership on there. But I wanted to show you, this is what the app looks like. So anything that we have now, you can access through the app, which is a great convenience, and something we've been working towards for a long time. So when you go log onto the app, once you're logged into Fearless Flight to our site, you can get access to anything that you have become a member on. So I wanted to throw that out there. Okay, I'll ask Don to come on right now, and we'll let him introduce himself here. Hey, welcome, Don. Glad to have you tonight. And I remember first seeing you in the Facebook group. It could have been a year ago. It might even have been more. I don't know, but I remember you're very articulate and very well read, and I think people get a sense of that. And so you're a really good spokesperson for describing the process, your process and stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons I was really excited tonight to talk about that, because this is a contact sport. You have to actually participate in your own recovery or your own efforts to get over this. And I don't know about you all, but mostly me, when I'm thinking about making a significant change in my life, behavior change or like that, whether it's dieting or whether it's working out or whatever, it's not as much fun as it. You can get the first 3 weeks, and when the honeymoon's over, it's like, not so much. And fear of flying certainly falls into that category. I think even more so, because when people have to fly, if you don't fly a whole lot, the motivation goes down when you do that. And so Don, welcome. And you want to just start out by give us a little background there?
Sure. Thank you, Ron. And it's really great. I feel like I'm with, 3 family members, like friends, old friends. And I mean, it feels like it's been longer that I've been part of the group virtually. I know, Ron, I've talked to you several times and have the deepest respect for you and Diana and Eric, and of course, Dieter, and the larger community. It's such a magnificent community. So I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I live in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington. A little bit of my story is I do international economic trade and policy work for the U.S. government. I right now work on Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And that job, which I'm now into my 20th year of this job, 20th. Wow. That job involves me flying overseas to different countries, in this case, those 3 countries. And I'm somewhat of an accidental flyer, because I come from a bit of a background where I had a sort of a rough start with a kind of a broken, family, and there's lots of early trauma that is probably not for this discussion, but I was sort of wired to have a lot of fear responses at the age of 3, 4, and 5. I think there were probably 5 or 6 divorces between my 2 parents, and my late father was a little rough around the edges and a little unstable. So, I was going into adulthood with a lot of, anxieties and developmental, things that just weren't really met. So
Eric and I have been accused of being accidental flyers too from time to time. I think for different reasons, but sorry, yeah. I had to take a quick shot there.
Oh, it's all good. And so I think for me, when I preface anything is to make sure that my friends here understand that flying is not my only target of my anxiety. I am somebody who was born, I had a very, I was born in a sort of a kind of a war setting and sort of family environment. And so I'm kind of wired. I have some different anxiety conditions I try to manage with meds and therapy.
So the accidental reference refers to chaotic, if not traumatic at times,
yes,
beginning to life.
With a capital T. I had a very violent father.
Yeah.
Capital T. So
That's common to a lot of fearful flyers. It's rarely that I talk to somebody and the only thing is I just don't like flying. Usually it's some other malady, in the form of anxiety that bothers them.
And that's one of the things, Ron, I think that drew me to this program, and is one that I really want to continue to work with, because I'm still a work in progress, and that is there is really a primal, deep-rooted mechanism that's already firing for many of us going into these situations. And so what drew me to the group was that on its surface, I've actually flown quite a lot. I mean, I've probably been to Europe in the course of this job, plus vacations, probably 25 or so times, 25 overseas trips. I've been across the United States. I've been to the Caribbean maybe about a dozen times, twice by myself, usually after a breakup with a girlfriend. I fly by myself and into warmer pastures. So I've actually done quite a lot of flying for somebody with the anxious constitution that I have, which I think says something. But I think what really drew me to this group a couple of years ago was the authenticity of everyone, the genuineness, and that sort of safety I felt, unlike maybe in my own family. I feel a real safety with this group. And frankly, it's helping me to maybe learn that what I find with my anxieties is that whenever I get on a plane, like I did last week, my anxieties build it up to be something that I've never done before. Like somehow this is a new, I'm somewhat of a veteran flyer, and yet the anxieties always reach a level of intensity where I feel like I'm not going to be able to manage my emotions on the flight. I'm uneasy about this idea of flying over water. And I make assumptions about how a flight will go, and that then plays out in my anxiety. So I'm going to pause there and see if the three of you have any questions or for any other.
I want to ask a couple real quick. One so you can identify both anxiety, general anxiety, and fear of flying. Was the general anxiety first, and then it kind of flowed over into flying, or did you notice that from the very first time you flew as well?
Well, it was really general anxiety and trauma. I mean, I flew as a kid, and I didn't have that many problems with flying in the course of these different, marriages, my parents. But it definitely kicked off. I was anxious long before the flying was ever an issue. Right. The 9/11 attacks, unfortunately, I lost. Actually, she was a psychologist I was working on some of my emotional issues with, and she was on a plane that was going to see her husband, and unfortunately hit the Pentagon, and I lost somebody who I really cared for. And I think that really made the flying even more of a center point of my anxiety.
So the 9/11 attacks had a personalized thing for you.
Yes.
Yes. And I have a question. During your younger years, did you ever fly as an unaccompanied minor? Did you ever fly yourself? So were you going back and forth between parents?
Yeah, I'm the middle of three sons, each a year apart, and we were all in the same. Yeah, we were. My father for many years lived up in Boston, and we lived down in the Washington D.C. area. So there were a number of instances where the three of us, my two brothers and me, each a year apart, would be on the plane by ourselves, flying up to Boston and back.
Yeah, that is a difficult thing for us as flight attendants, because we know when during the holidays and summer vacations and stuff, we have a lot of kids who are flying unaccompanied, and it's a hard for them. Sometimes they show it, and sometimes more often they don't, that they are being kind of shuttled between parents. And it's always stressful for them. And
you'd see kids in tears, either leaving the primary parent or leaving the weekend parent or whatever. It was really,
so
really
we see that. That's why I happen to ask with your situation.
And Don, when you mentioned a couple of years, when you started getting involved with us, how did you find us? Just out of curiosity.
So, great question, Ron. I had read a number of the books, Fearful Flying books, and have been in therapy for longer than the three of you have been alive. But I think I found you all. It might have been something that was on Facebook that I found, and I was immediately drawn to the authenticity, the genuineness. And again, here, Ron, thank you for your service. You were in Vietnam, and I was drawn to that authenticity, and then building on that, also the very useful, the tactical things that one can deploy while they're flying, but also the more strategic, the larger big framework of looking at one's own approach to a flight in addition to the tactical specific things.
Okay. And when people are going to notice, I've been getting a lot of feedback where people want to go deeper in the coaching session. So the next webinar that we do is going to be deeper in terms of pure techniques, strategies, or pure tools, strategies, and techniques, and to address that strategic part that you talk about. You can have a tool like breathing, and you could come up with a strategy like playing with different ways that you breathe. And a technique is the specific ways that you manifest that and find success in that. And so we're going to do that. And, I just want to say a little word about families in general. I share, you and I have done a lot of private coaching and talking, and I'm quite open with my own history. I grew up with the Midwestern intact mom and dad, 63 years they were married when my dad died. But they, bless their hearts, they just didn't have a whole lot of relationship skills. I knew they were in love on some level, but other times they'd have a lot of conflict. And for me, I can identify with it. It leaves you on guard in a way that I wasn't aware of, until I got older myself. You're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And of course, that's common in alcoholic families and things like that. And I think that's one of the things that you and I shared. And I think I wanted to mention that because people, if you're out there and you're afraid to fly, that's an easy thing to make to see transference where you're on an airplane. And now it isn't that what's going on in an airplane that or not knowing what's going on that bothers you so much. It's that you just don't know what's going on, right. and you're just waiting for something to go wrong because we're wired that way, right? And we're not only wired that way physiologically, we're wired that way if you grew up in a typical American family, because you're waiting for dad to get mad or mom to get mad or whatever, and it conditions a kid. You mentioned my Vietnam service. Vietnam was a day at the beach compared to growing up in my family in many ways, And again, I'm not throwing stuff at my parents and all that. They did the best that they could and all that, but it's something that was stressful for me. So anyway, how are things? What have you gotten out of this so far? And if you can relate that to the trip that you took last week.
Yeah, no, great questions. And again, and there was certainly all kinds of alcoholism in my family. And again, there wasn't ever any recognition of sort of, I think, the emotional states that the kids were in, and we were sort of I don't want to say pawns, but we were in the back. It was the other people's show. And so we never really learned to downregulate or,
right.
Our own emotions. And so to me, it's not surprising that in my 50s now that I still, for me, setting aside flying, for me, relaxing is something that is not second nature to me. It's just not.
And I want to emphasize that is what the parasympathetic nervous system is. The sole purpose is to downregulate, and that's what living in chaos does. It kind of undermines any opportunity to learn how to do that. And when, it's like anything, if you try to learn a language at 6 years old, it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to learn a language at 60 years old.
Right.
So the later you get it, the harder it is to learn how to downregulate. So I just want to emphasize that.
No, thank you. So a couple things that I might just sort of share that I've taken from the great teachings that you all have provided. One is, it's okay to be anxious. about flying. I think there's a sense that many of us have, at least myself, that there's no reason why I should be relaxed on these flights. And I think the first key is a level of acceptance. Now, why acceptance? And you all have taught me this, is if you accept where you're at and your emotions and your physical emotions and your mental emotions, that then allows you to choose the next moment.
Yeah.
Because when you accept, then you can choose the next moment. Because usually when you're already anxious, you're accepting what is already taking place. So you accept the emotions. Don't fight trying to be relaxed, because that creates its own pressure. Allow yourself to be anxious. But the caveat on that first point, and you've said this, Ron, and actually Diana and Dieter and Eric too, you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid of your own thoughts. You could experience them, but it doesn't, you really have to be careful about buying into what your head is saying. So I think that's one real important point. It is okay to fly anxious. And if I can do it, anybody can. I would say that the second point that you've made, the four of you have made, is it's okay to then allow yourself, once you accept the moment, refocus. And even if it's for a moment, you can refocus on the physicality of the plane, of the sounds that you hear, the sights you see. How does that ground feel on your feet? How does the armchair rest? And when you start to notice those physical features, in that moment, you're actually out of that cycle, that anxious cycle. So for me, you accept, you refocus, you can, and it maybe it's longer. Maybe you can read a page in a book, journal, Ron, as you've said, journal with your left hand, your non-dominant hand. The other thing, the last thing I'll say is trust the industry, trust the technology. And I think that is something that I have. One of the things that was clear to me last week, flying twice over the Atlantic, was that this is a real powerful machine that I'm in, and that there are backups, and there's data that's shared within the plane during the flight, between flights, data that helps the engineers and the pilots understand this is how this operates. That I didn't feel really any sense of vulnerability. I made certain assumptions about these flights last week, and I was wrong. I assumed that they were going to be horrible flights, so I was anxious. I was assuming that they would be turbulent and that I would be anxious the whole flights, and somehow I didn't know what I was stepping into. So assumption one was wrong. Okay, the flight over to Germany, we had about 2 hours of moderate turbulence over the North Atlantic when you leave the Canadian airspace. Wasn't that really big of a deal? What I did, you all taught me this. Establish a relationship with somebody before that flight takes off. And I did that. I forget her name. She was an attendant. And I just said, look, I'm a nervous flyer. When that turbulence hit, I would just wave to her and she would just give me a thumbs up, and I felt relaxed. Nice. And you know what? That turbulence didn't last the whole flight.
Yeah.
So I was wrong. I was incorrect.
And probably more important, not only did it not last the whole flight, but you weren't worried that it would last the whole flight, because that's where anticipatory anxiety comes in, is, and again, going back to just about anybody who grows up in a family, is that's one of the casualties, is we don't learn to trust. You don't have somebody to rely on. So trust is a big thing. That's why I say, I don't care if you tell me, I know flying's safe and airplane's not going to crash and all that. You're just worried about being trapped. You need to know more about what goes on around you. You need to know what those sights, sounds, and sensations are, because that's the foundation that you need, so that you can eliminate some of the crap that you're worried about. and some of the bias, the negative bias that we have in all that. So you introduce yourself to the flight attendant, or at least mentioned to her that you were nervous about flying, and then you were flying with some peers, people that you work with and all.
Yes.
Was that
Yes.
a factor? Okay.
Yes. We were in different parts of the plane, but we had a boss that was probably closer to the front of the plane, and I was, I may think maybe toward the back, but it was, so I had those sort of peers within, on the plane, if that was needed. It never was. But I also routinely try to establish a rapport with people that I sit around, not in any way to disrupt their flight, but there was a young lady I was talking to on the flight over who's from France, and we were just chatting, and that provided me with a connection, which again was downregulated, was helped me to relax.
Right. And connection is key to anybody. That's why I recommend make a connection with the pilots, or with the flight attendants and the pilots if you can, and don't try to share the burden alone. And then if you have the luxury and the skills and the willingness to connect with people, seated around you and stuff like that, because it helps, one, divert your attention and distract you somewhat, and so you don't worry about it so much. I'm just curious, was it a wide body airplane? An airplane with two aisles going over? Do you remember?
Oh yeah. It was you all may not be surprised, but I tend to research my planes before I get on them. It was, methodically.
And it had the appropriate numbers of wings, landing gear, and everything, and they all seemed to work.
Yeah, it was a Boeing 777. And I had an aisle seat. It was I think the flight over the pond was a 3, 3, and 3 setup. The flight back was magnificent. It was a 3, 4, and 3, so even bigger.
Yeah.
I think it was a 200, a 777. I also really love the A380, the Airbus A380 Dreamliner. I flew to Istanbul, Turkey for vacation. It was magnificent. So one thing I would add, and I feel like I've been talking a lot. I found that texting, and Ron, you were very kind, and Dieter was as well. You said, look, if you're having some challenges up there in the air, drop me a text. I can't guarantee I'll get right back to you, but just doing that and investing in the internet service when you're up in the air, that normalizes that experience. Check your email.
Right. Yeah. And for the purposes of everybody out there, most of the airlines now have free if they have Wi-Fi, they have a free version for texting alone. You can't access the internet and you can't check your email, but then there is a version for that. And I found when I was flying inter-European travel last summer that Norwegian, for example, they had free internet. So you got not only that, you could surf and all that. And so that's a great observation there to do that. I'm going to alert everybody. All of you might see, I put a document in the chat there that says Don Calvert Flying Best Practices. And I kid you not, Don takes this so seriously, and it's an inspiration. That's one of the reasons I was really excited about having him on here. Go through that. I gave Don some areas that we might talk about tonight. Holy cow. That's like a thesis for a master's on how to overcome your fear of flying. So I'll encourage you to take a look at that. And Don, one of the things that I'm referring to there is you came up with your own acronym. So you are really cool. Anybody that's got their own acronym, you called it RTAP. Acceptance, refocus, technology, assumptions, and physical grounding. So you want to just take that through there, or just a quick rundown of what that means to you?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. And again, I think that what I would say to all of my friends out in the universe here that are watching is that one needs to. It is scary to put. For many of us, it's going to be scary to put yourself on the plane. We need to. One of the things is there's the famous clinician, Dr. Reed Wilson, world-renowned psychologist in North Carolina, specializes in anxiety disorders. But Reed Wilson says, you have to act as if those things that are in your head are noise, not signals. Yeah. Act as though you can do them. And so when I say my acronym, I would say one is you act as though you can do this.
Yeah.
And you will actually find a way to do it. You also accept your anxiety. Don't fight being an anxious flyer. That creates more anxiety. So that's one thing. R is refocus. Refocus in the moment. Refocus on the person that just walked by. The slightest refocus is a neural pathway. Read a page, read a sentence. So it can be the slightest thing. Watch 5 minutes of the movie on your screen, if there is one. T is technology. Trust the technology. Notice the power of this thing that you're in. There is a lot going on in this highly regulated industry that you're in, and this is it's just everything has been double checked. Ron, I also wanted to say that I really, for overseas flights, something you and Eric have touched on, I think Diana too, is 120-minute.
Right, 120 rule, it's called. Yeah.
Was immensely helpful for me because when I was over the Atlantic last week, that helped me to say, all right, if something happened, we could actually divert and go to Iceland. And it just gave me that sense of, all right, there is an out if something happened. That was extremely helpful. So thank you. I wanted just to acknowledge that because that was one of the best pieces of thing that I walked away from our coaching session, Ron, that I think that people would really benefit when they talk to you and the others. And so thank you for that. That was a gift to me that you gave me.
I was a pilot all my life, but I did do a lot of international. Even when I started teaching international to other pilots, it was like, I realized I didn't know a whole lot about geography, some places of the world, until I started looking, there are places to land in the Atlantic, down there in the Azores or up in the Great Circle, we go over those places. So, so it's helpful to yourself. Yeah.
And you use the correct word for the Atlantic, the pilot word, Don. I heard you say it, the pond. That's the pilots say, where are you going? I'm going over the pond. If you're going over the Pacific, you're going over the ocean. That's a whole different deal. But the Atlantic,
that's a whole different deal.
And you can dispatch over that morning, noon, or night under that 120-minute rule. But if you're going to cross the Pacific, you have to be at least 180. So you already knew that on the ETOPS rules.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
The last couple things are just to the acronyms is, assumptions. I think most fearful people, myself, I'm at the top of that list, make sort of negative assumptions about how parts of their lives, and I'm not talking about front, this could be me giving a presentation or me, I don't know, going on a romantic dinner with my girlfriend. We make negative assumptions. And I think there needs to be an openness for us in this community that your assumptions are incorrect.
And we're wired that way, Don. We're wired to think of the worst possible scenario. Okay. Right. And if there's anything I would say about the cruise and stuff, Diane, Eric, and I, we've already been coached on what the worst possible scenarios are, so we literally, we're not sharing any of our wages with you, because if you're sitting there worrying, we appreciate the worrying that you do, but we're not going to pay you for it because that's what we're paid to do.
Right. We have pre-worried for you.
Exactly.
I have one
in advance.
I got one really fast question. When you got into the turbulence going across and you waved at the flight attendant and she gave you a thumbs up, was she up doing service or was she seated?
I'm pretty sure she was seated when she gave me I happened to be at a point where she was, I think that she was seated.
Okay. So they had stopped service and the cabin crew was seated.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
It never got, thank you, Ari. That's a good question. That flight never got, none of these flights, 4 flights last week, none of them ever got to that level.
Yeah.
Typically when I go down to the Caribbean, those warmer parts, that's sometimes you get into, I followed a hurricane one year. I was in the Bahamas 15 years ago, and we were on the tail end of a storm coming back through Atlanta. So world's largest airport, Atlanta. And this small plane I was in, I am not kidding you all, was bouncing up and down in that sky.
Sure.
But you know what? I survived it. And I'm glad I am.
I want to just touch on the fact. So in greeting that flight attendant, what was it like to look across however many seats you did and to look into her eyes and make a connection, right? I mean, because she knew you now from the other people on the airplane, right? I mean, when you looked and you gave her the high sign and she gave you the high sign, it was more than just something she would do to a total stranger. She was actually paying attention to you.
She was.
Yeah.
She was.
And that's you want to take advantage of meeting Diane when you come in the door. You want to do that because though they got nothing better to do when it comes to, sitting there waiting for the turbines to pass either. So they might as well make eye contact with you and give you a thumbs up. Just a little, emotional pat on the back, if you will. Yeah.
It is. And when I use the restroom on these transatlantic flights or smaller ones, very often there's a chance to say hello to people, that are working the plane. Yeah. And what I typically start off is I say what I mean. I thank you for your service. And I don't know that they're expecting that. So I've already validated this person maybe more than maybe they've gotten all day long. And there's a connection that she and I had on that flight. I respected her and she really admired that I was open with her about my anxiety. And it really calmed me down.
Yeah. You have no idea how much that means to us, because I don't even know what the percentage is of passengers that don't appreciate what we do. And so when someone like yourself says something like that, you are automatically our best friend. I just want to let you know. You really are. And it's not that we don't like the rest of the passengers, but as you said, you validated us, and we want even more than normal to help you in whatever way we can. And if it's, for me, the bumpier it gets, the more I smile, because I can see those passengers looking up at me. Sometimes they've got the deer in the headlights look, and I just want to smile at them. And it's like, it's no big deal. It's just fine. And I can see kind of their bodies relax a little bit when we do that. So when you engage with the flight attendants, it helps us too to do our job better. So thank you.
Yeah. It keeps us from getting really complacent, and when I started after 9/11 and I started walking back and doing my pre-briefing to people, but literally face to face in the cabin, it allowed me to redefine my job, because I've been doing it for almost 40 years by that point. And it does get routine, and it reminded, and even sitting up the cockpit, I would remember the faces of people when I go up there, and I'm sure Diane knows it too. It makes you feel like you're there for a reason, more so than just just going on autopilot, because the one thing you don't want your crew members doing is going on autopilot. You want them in the moment with you as well. So again, I want to call everybody's attention to the document, the PDF file that I put in there, and thank you, Don, for all that. Any last words for anybody out there that thinks, but he wasn't really that afraid? He's come on.
I would thank you, Ron. I first of all, I would just gently, if you were somebody like my girlfriend who understands that I really am somebody who, and I just say this as a matter of fact, is that I do live with a certain chronicity of anxiety. And if you were with me driving on a highway, you would see that. If you were I'm not necessarily the guy that is going to be the most relaxed person at a bar.
Right.
I'm great when it comes to small talk with diplomats, but I'm very, very anxious because I'm grounded in trauma.
Yeah.
But with that said, if I can do that, my take home message is, with the support of this team that you all have cultivated, I think that people can really make a difference and get out there and explore the world. So I thank you all.
You're welcome. It's really, really awesome to talk to people like you who really, when people's, just today, our record fearful flyer, Susan, up in Boston, she was getting anxious. She hadn't flown since we flew in March, and she flew just today, or just yesterday. And, she was leading up. She checked in with me, and we talked about a couple things. And I just reminded her how, the things that she had told me when we flew in Boston like that. And I get, just like you, within minutes of her landing, she said, "Oh my gosh, it was, I was nervous when I started, but it went away rapidly." And that's what I think that I can safely say for most people. Once you get some tools and some skills and some strategies on board, and stay on the airplane and don't get off, the future is really, really bright for that, because you're now building on some strengths that you didn't have before, and you can do it. You can do it, and you're living proof, Don. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and last thing I would say, you all, the four of you, have created an environment where I really feel like I'm at home with this group an hour and a half a week. And that, to me, I'm immensely grateful for, because I never felt like I really belonged anywhere. That's just the environment I grew up in. And you all have really created a space where, whether we're talking about flying or other things, it's really time that's well spent. So thank you.
Thanks.
You're very welcome.
What a nice.
Yep.
You're very
And
welcome.
anybody out there that's got any doubts, this is more what it's going to be like when we as we get deeper and deeper into coaching issues. And so if you got nothing better to do, and you really want to work on your stuff, come and join us in December, the next coaching class or coaching webinar that we're going to do. So thanks, Don. You can just stay with us here. I'm gonna talk about a couple of things. Diane's got a couple of observations, and so let me bring up the slides again. So hopefully you all can see that. I just ran across a Wall Street Journal reported on the best and worst airports of 2022. I saw this, and I want to talk about this in tongue in cheek, because first, it's like anything. What makes the best airport? What is the word? And generally, they were looking at the reliability of flights and all that. And it's really complex. And I'm neither here to criticize nor to praise this particular report, but it's interesting just to see some of the things that the airports are looking at, see how they rated the best and the worst and all that. And if you're curious, San Francisco was rated at the top. Phoenix, and Diane knows a lot about that, because she volunteers at the Phoenix airport. They're number 5 in this. So even though I said no big deal, I take a little bit of pride living in the Phoenix area there. So what the heck? And they talked about convenience, things like that. They talked about weather stuff, all the stuff that you're going to hear us talk about. And if you had to pick someplace to go for good information, I'd pick FearlessFlight instead of the Wall Street Journal anyway, or any day. So hang in there with us if you are a member and want to get over this thing. This is, I was talking, the holidays always bring up for me, the first time I was ever away from home on a major holiday in my life was going to Vietnam. But the first time it ever happened to me was the first year of my employment at Frontier Airlines. And we were serving some little places up in not unlike what Diane does, up in the northwest and in the north central United States. So this was we were supposed to get off the trip on Thanksgiving, the night before Thanksgiving, and or the day of Thanksgiving, I guess it was. And anyway, we were coming through Denver, and there was a snowstorm, and we were launching out of Worland, Wyoming, and there's a hotel. This is where we had it. We spent our layovers there, the Washakie Hotel. And it was my first time ever away from home. So the captain and I went across the street. There was a little bitty bar, was the only place open. And we had a Tombstone pizza and a beer when they popped those things in the oven. So I just thought, when you're with your family, celebrate it and appreciate it. We had a good time, needless to say, but that was, and as part of that, you may have read in the news, they just had a huge dump last weekend up in upper New York State, over in the Buffalo area.
Buffalo, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's another storm headed for places in the east or the southeast. I think they're talking about that. And we used to joke every year, either Christmas or Thanksgiving, Denver would get a major dump of snow there. So just hang in there, and and be patient. And Diane, you wanted to say you had a couple observations about winter operations and stuff
Right,
again.
right. I know a couple of shows ago I touched on winter operations, and then certainly with the holidays coming up, and a major travel day is tomorrow. Once again, as Ron said, that I have been volunteering at Phoenix Sky Harbor as a navigator for almost 18 years now, and they are predicting for this holiday season that the numbers of travelers, passengers, is going to at least be at the 2019, which is pre-COVID levels, and even greater than that, which means that the lines are going to be longer. Even driving, trying to find a parking place or trying to drop somebody off, all of those things are going to take longer. So do, as I said a few weeks ago, pack your patience, get there early. We can't hold planes. We don't do that kind of anymore. And the same thing, if you haven't made a reservation yet, you're waiting for the last minute sort of thing. And if you have a connection, make sure the connection's long, because winter operations, this last trip, as I said, I had one night in Bismarck, North Dakota, where the temperature in the morning was 6. And we had, we're going to be de-icing. De-icing takes long. We were a half an hour, 45 minutes in that queue to get de-iced. The same thing in Moline, Illinois. So everything is going to take longer over the holiday season. People are going to be rushed. And so do be as patient and as flexible. And keep in mind for your flight crews, as Ron and Eric know very, very well, and I know well enough, we're away from our families for the holidays. My first Thanksgiving flying, we had Thanksgiving dinner, the pilot and the other flight attendant and I sitting at a bar in Salt Lake City, and we had turkey as we were sitting at the bar. That was Thanksgiving dinner. So if you, I know you're tired when you're flying, but if you can be a little extra understanding of your flight crews, because this year I am working, I have Thanksgiving off, but I'm working Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day. And so we want to get you to your families and your friends for the holidays, but just be as kind and understanding as you can possibly be when you travel. And bring blankets, bring your own earbuds. We don't provide those things anymore. And bring food to eat, and bring food for the flight attendants, because we'll be really nice to you.
And Starbucks gift certificates. So one of the fun things as a crew member is sometimes the crews that get stuck out away from home on Thanksgiving, oftentimes that's the best time of the year, because the hotels sometimes will put on private spreads for you and things like that. Eric, do you think of any memorable holidays that you spent on the road?
No, nothing that I can admit on the air. And all you guys so famously, I'm happy to just sit here and watch. This is great.
All right. So the Washakie, I had to do this. I love the Google and all that. The Washakie Hotel was named after this fellow. This Native American was born somewhere on the late 1700s and lived for almost 90 years, according to Wikipedia and stuff. And so the hotel was named after him. So I want to give him a shout out there as well. So anyway, all right. So I want to thank everybody. Don, thank you once again for opening yourself up here. Really appreciate what you brought forward. Take a look at that downloadable, the PDF that I put in there that Don put together. And thanks again, Diane. And hope you have a great holiday. Eric, same thing. And all of you out there, hope you have a really, really happy Thanksgiving, and come back and see us again next week for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. Okay,
Diane,
bye-bye.
Don, stay on for a second after we sign off.